Well, good afternoon, Longhaultanker, straight razor shaving with Longhaultanker. And today is Sunday, the 21st of June, 2025 at approximately 1500. That's 3 p.m. Eastern time. I am in Orangeburg, South Carolina, which is about 50 miles north or so of Charleston, South Carolina. And this is where I said I would be, and I got in early. It was a 5-hour drive this morning from West Point, Georgia, which is about an hour to the southwest of Atlanta. Got through Atlanta this morning quick and easy. Surprise. Anyway, and I am at the Love's Truck Stop in Orangeburg, South Carolina, and as promised, I'm doing another shave. And I'm glad I'm having this opportunity because you saw me use the pink razor, the Soligen, on the last shave. I was down to my last two on the current roll-up before I progressed on to the next roll-up. And today gives me an opportunity to go back and revisit the Lord Barber, which I love this. This has a very sentimental, nostalgic place in my heart. A. McCoo, Belgarde on the tang, the Lord Barber, and some other French words. And this is the one that Dino Stamadiades has in the Legrot, and the face of the blade is exactly the same font style, same lettering, same wording as Dino Stamadiades has on his Thiers-Assard Legrot with this face, and it says, Thiers-Assard Legrot on the tang. And it's a very interesting razor. He doesn't know anything about the history, at least so I've gathered through what he has said to me. He wrote in his native language, which was probably Greek. Anyway, so but this razor I honed it up and did a refresh on it about a year ago. And this is one of the very early razors that I did a lot of practice on. When I say a lot, I mean, this is where I learned. It was on this razor that I practiced honing on the Zulu Gray dry, using it dry, no water, no slurry, no nothing, just because it was so hard. It's like in Arkansas in that respect. It's so hard and it's so dense. Water would just run right off, which water does on the Arkansas. It just runs right off. You've got to get it mixed in with some kind of a slurry, whether it's a soap, like Dawn dishwashing liquid or something like that's what you do on the Arkansas. And so anyway, so I used it dry for the longest time. This last time I used the Zulu Gray slurry, because in the meantime, just a couple of years ago, I got those little credit card lapping plates, if you want to call it that with abrasive on the plate, extra fine, and was lapping up some slurry on the Zulu, and oh my, just made all the difference in the world. The soap is Sterling Bay rum, as I've been using on this trip. I believe this is the third, maybe the fourth shave in a row that I've used the Bay rum. I started one at home, maybe the third, and I brought two brushes with me. You saw me use the Boar Bristle by Zenith, the little aluminum, and this is a QED Select Manchurian Silvertip Badger 24 millimeter in a imitation or faux garnet. And it's got some little sparkly stones mixed in. I say stone, some kind of sparkly stuff mixed in. All right, let's get started. The water at the sink, as well as the shower, are tepid, barely warm. I've got a little bit to say, and I wish I had more time to say it, or more time to produce the video and get some interesting graphics in there. But you may recall last year that I was doing a little bit more political commentary and going back, and when I was talking about Theodore Roosevelt, who was no friend of the Constitution, mind you, and a lot of people are quite deceived by Theodore Roosevelt and how he became, check out McKinley's Vice President Hobart. Anyway, I had, and then how he was assassinated, or rather, a lot of those guys were poisoned back then, and we never paid much attention to it by way of assassination. And Hobart cleared the way for Theodore Roosevelt to become vice president under McKinley. Then McKinley was assassinated, and well, what do you know? And so that paved the way for the Federal Reserve later, and some other nefarious things that if we had known about them as they occurred, Theodore Roosevelt would likely have gone to jail. But I digress. He had excellent handlers, one of which is a fellow by the name of Bernard Baruch. Bernard Baruch. And I made reference to him in some of those videos from last year, even if it was just passing. You know, the idea was to get you to do a little bit of homework and research on these guys that I was presenting. And he was, Bernard Baruch was like the George Soros of his day. And he was in with Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Herbert Hoover, Franklin Roosevelt, certainly Harry Truman. He was in with Eisenhower, both as a general and as president, and then with, you'll see, and I include, there's pictures of them all together, the last of which was John F. Kennedy. And where he's sporting a white suit, a linen suit, and white Panama hat. Anyway, you'd have to go back and look at those videos, but those are all pictures that are readily available on the internet. And here's I want to go back to what I was what I was making commentary on in the last video. And I don't know that I'm going to be any more substantive or revealing than what I was in the last video. But the thing that's changed today versus that video was the successful bombing mission by the United States on Iran last night, and the taking out of the bunkers and destroying the nuclear facilities. Of course, Israel played and that'd be the last time I used that word in this video. The preliminary work that they did in paving the way for the military action that the United States engaged in yesterday. So it was a cooperative effort between the two nations. And when I refer to that state again, I will refer to it as that nation state. Keep that in mind. That nation state. Because I made reference to Tucker Carlson, and it's like all hell broke loose over that video between Tucker Carlson and my senator, Ted Cruz. And I said in my video that Ted Cruz was wrong and Tucker Carlson was largely correct. Now, there's some things he needs to be schooled on. He's not a theologian like I am. And some of you who may regard yourselves as Christian people you may very well, because mine is not the dominant view, but I do believe that mine is the correct view. And it's dispensationalism versus replacement ideology or theology. That nation state, which shall not be named, has a very dubious beginning, going back to even before Bernard Baruch in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And the groundwork was laid by theologians by the name of Darby, because there's a thing called Darbyism that preceded Scofield, the Scofield Bible. The Scofield Bible, as I understand it, I've never seen one, I've never opened one, is the text of the King James Version with footnotes, references, and commentary at the bottom of the page by John Scofield. I forget what his name is. Scofield, the Scofield Bible. And amongst certain people, it's very popular. And it came out in the late, let's get started with the Lord Barber on my 44 hours worth of whiskers on my face. And also, a question I want to pose to you for your consideration and contemplation is, who was Barabbas? What is the significance and role that this individual plays at a particular scene in the New Testament? Barabbas, 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 give us Barabbas. And why is that important? But anyway, which begs the question, well, no, I won't go there yet. I lost my train of thought. That's why I paused out there for a minute. But we were talking about Bernard Baruch. And Barabbas. The crucifixion of Jesus in the New Testament, in the Gospels, is believed to have occurred 33 AD. Yes, I said AD, not BC or Common Era or that other language that's used, the traditional language. And even Jesus made reference to a great destruction that was going to be coming upon Judea and Jerusalem. Matthew 24, for example. And so that begs the question, what happened in AD 70 with the Jewish rebellion? Nope, I won't say that word again. That Josephus writes about the ultimate destruction at Masada, what happened in Jerusalem. Now that word I can say again, it's just a place. Which begs the question, who killed the Son of God? Who killed and crucified the Son of God? And who bears guilt, shame, judgment, and punishment for having killed the Son of God? Well, it wasn't the Gentiles, because, anyway, I'm not going into a full discussion, and where this video will ultimately end up on YouTube, they won't want to hear what I'm saying. Even though they did leave that argument. So the central question, the point that Senator Ted Cruz made was that nameless country today is the same nameless country of 5,000 years ago, of 4,000 years ago. The ancient city, the ancient nation of those people. And so since that destruction of Judea and Jerusalem, since AD 70, that nation ceased to exist for nearly 2,000 years in the physical realm of history. The physical realm of history. Let me ask this question as well, just something to think about and ponder. By what right does any nation have to exist? Now, any people can get together and decide that based upon these criteria, we want to exist as a nation. And it's usually something they have in common, their shared history, their genetics, most people around where I live understand that Mexico belongs to the Mexicans. It don't take a genius to figure that out. And it don't take a genius to figure out that a bunch of gringos got together in 1836 and took Sam Houston, and his compatriots, William Barrett Travis and Stephen Austin, and some of these guys and they took it, and with the ultimate victory, Sam Houston took Generalissimo Santa Anna. I heard, who was it? The guy that used to be at Harvard, a law school professor. We would all know them if I called his name. I'll get it out in a minute. But he went over this business about what right does any nation have to exist, about shared experience, shared heritage, shared genetics. But ultimately, people appeal to all sorts of things like common law. Common law and natural law. But ultimately, this guy is quite prolific, writes all kinds of books. and he's on the political he calls himself he calls himself a liberal, but he's very much a libertarian style of for heaven's sake, what's his name? Anyway, his argument, after going through all this stuff, ultimately comes down to one thing, that every nation that exists on the basis of one thing, force of arms. Force of arms. We have a self-determined right to exist, and we will enforce that by force of arms. You got something to say about that? Which, ultimately that's true. Now, what may have been true for a certain group of people 4,000 years ago may not be true today, and especially if you believe in supernatural, as I do, and certainly as it relates to this certain nameless group of people that live in a certain location near the Mediterranean. After the Romans got done with them in AD 70, where they were once called a people, now they're not a people at all because they don't even have a land and haven't had a land or the organized, structured religion that Moses talked about. I can say Moses, I dare say, because he's a real person, or was a real person, and is representative of a thing called the Law of Moses. Now that's where I disagree strenuously with Senator Ted Cruz, that nation that lives over there, that is situated over there by the Mediterranean, that I shall not name again, is not the same nation that once existed, say from the time of Moses forward. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to argue with me and disagree with me, and I don't much care one little bit. But like Tucker Carlson said, I'm not willing to send my children and grandchildren to war to defend a country that claims to be something when theologically, rationally, intellectually, they're not. Now, that don't mean I deny their right to exist, because any nation that has the wherewithal to enforce their right to exist by a force of arms, okay, you've got a place in the world. Not because you claim a name of a nation that occupied the same or a similar piece of ground that you occupy today. That doesn't make you them, especially when your religion and national structure don't resemble what theirs did then. And you want to be called the same name, but you don't bear any resemblance to that nation then. And furthermore, you were put out of your misery, if I may say so boldly, by the same God who brought you into existence, took you out of existence because you killed the only Son of God. Now, remember what the people said when Pilate said, it was their custom to give away at that time of year because of that religious celebration that they were observing at the time. And they said, "Give us Barabbas. What shall I do with this man? Crucify him, crucify him. Let his blood be upon our heads, and our children and our children's children. Let his blood." Well, I know there's an argument, and I think it's a deceptive argument about who really killed Jesus, who really which brings in the whole question of the cooperative nature of the Romans and the people who occupied that land and the religious structure. But to claim that that nation is the same nation that occupies the same piece of ground or near the same piece of ground there today, it doesn't follow. It doesn't follow. You can call yourself Tarzan. You can call yourself Arnold Schwarzenegger, but that don't make you Arnold Schwarzenegger or Tarzan. Now, if I had more time to put graphics together and quotations from the Bible and other such historical references, and even Tucker Carlson made a passing reference, with reticent to talk about such things because of the accusations that would come against him for being anti-this or anti-that. And it's just not worth the headache and the trouble to have to defend yourself against certain organized groups who are completely dedicated to defending their right to exist. Or it's not just their right to exist, but to call themselves something that they're not. And it's not just them. There's a whole group of people who would find commonality in their faith system and their genetics and so when I say genetics, I'm talking about race. And what they are called as a group of people. I call myself an American. Not white American, not Anglo-American, not... we can break it down. If we were having that kind of conversation, I don't think we are. But that brings into question another word that's often used, and I'm not going to call it out other than to say it starts with a Z. Z, and I think it's used, the noun form is used once or twice in the Bible, but not in the way that it's used in modern usage today. It's used in reference to the city of Jerusalem. They went up to a certain hill called Z. For example. But I don't think that word is used in Scripture very, very much at all. Once, twice, three times, certainly less than on one or two hands. And so that all that background, and Tucker never got to the point, the point that I wanted him to get to. And it goes back to these people at the end of the 19th century who were clamoring for the establishment of a nation state. And the ground was already being laid by guys in religious terms. Oh, they've got to have a homeland. Even though God had taken away the original old homeland almost 1900 years before. Guys like Darby and Schofield that I made reference to before. On the religious side, the theological side, then on the secular governmental side, political side, you've got guys like Bernard Baruch, back during the days of McKinley and anyway, it's a fascinating study. At that time, back at when certain people were clamoring for the establishment of a certain, or dare I say, the reestablishment of a certain nation occupying the same or similar piece of ground, calling it the same name as the forerunner nation. What happened, I just come right out and say it. I'm trying to be clever. I'm trying to be a little bit clever leading into this next part. Because there's more names that I've got to say that I'm not going to say. And these are the kind of names that if you get on their radar, they'll take you out. and that is, well, go back to the Treaty of Versailles, which is the controlling document for the end of World War I. And there's a subsection in there called if I get this right, the Balfour Memorandum. And part of this goes back to, well, you remember the movie with Lawrence of Arabia, and Peter O'Toole played that part. Some of this goes, because he's the guy, the British guy, he was the British representative and you remember that one scene where he was so disgusted, he was relieved of duty right at the end of the movie, and he went home without having really resolved anything. Well, that's because the decisions had already been made by other people much higher than himself. He wasn't a king, he wasn't a duke, he was not. He was just a soldier. Well, where did that Balfour Declaration memorandum come from? Now, and how did it get into the Treaty of Versailles as a controlling document? And who had to give up the land, and who's still not happy about having given up that piece of land to accommodate these people? See, I'm dancing all around it. And anybody that has any knowledge about what's going on knows exactly what I'm talking about. And these are just things that you just can't normally talk about in open public. And my video may get banned, but we shall see. But the people that got that in there are the same people that make money on both sides of a war. Let that sink in for a minute. And they were, banking interest people in England and Europe and France, and who were the big names in banking and money lending, and they continue to exist today, and are just as, I think they've got controlling interest in the Bank of England, and if the truth be told, they probably have controlling interest in the Federal Reserve. So these are not people that you play with. These are not people that you trifle with. And what they want, they usually get, or they start a war and profit on both sides. Anyway, I'm being a little bit silly now, but not much. But the interesting thing is about the Balfour document, who wrote it, who got it into the Treaty of Versailles. Just like Bernard Baruch, this family that I'm referring to, they're all over Europe. They have controlling interest in so much of Europe. England, UK, France, Germany. Fascinating history on some of this stuff. There was something else I was going to say. Oh, this family that I'm making reference to also hail from that genetic stock that I'm referring to, who occupy that piece of land over there. I'm going to link in an article that I read yesterday that addresses so much of what I'm referring to. Both, and it was written or assembled, this article, subsequent to the conversation, the 2-hour conversation between Tucker Carlson and Senator Ted Cruz, and the article makes reference to that conversation and the salient points that were brought up. And the obliviousness of my Senator Ted Cruz to say what he said, at least not having any apparent understanding of just how horribly controversial his words would be, even in the Christian community, which I consider myself a part of. I stay up with a lot of stuff, not to mention I've got my master's degree in theology. Myself was a pastor and was myself a pastor for 20 years. And so, yeah, it's not, these things are not unfamiliar to me whatsoever. So without being too controversial or too offensive, it really is the age-old argument between what's commonly called dispensationalism and replacement theology. I would represent the replacement theology side of things, not the dispensational. I think that is dangerous theology. But I'm happy to talk about those things without being ugly about them. Now, the only time I'm going to get ugly about stuff is when you want to cut the wieners off of little boys. That might make me upset. Well, I've kind of reached the end of what it is I wanted to talk about. Especially in light of that conversation with Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson, and in light of what. Now, let me say one more thing. It just came to mind here. I've got no problem with that nation state that occupies that small piece of land, no bigger than the size of New Jersey, as they've been saying on the news. I've got no problem with a certain group of people who call themselves by a certain name, that they're some of their ancestors, or at least the ancestors of the people who once upon a time occupied that land, and they want to call themselves. But, you know, these are not people that are what you might call homegrown. And it's also been shown, I think I'm going to get that this was going to be a genetic remark about the continuity from present day to ancient day of the genetic progression. Because, you know, after World War II and the Holocaust, all those people that came out of Germany and Poland, the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 created what was known as the diaspora, which sent the local inhabitants out into the world. They no longer had a nation state, they no longer had a home, they had to go make their own lives, and they intermingled with the people that they settled with. Diaspora, I think that was called diaspora, dysphoria, the diaspora, and how much the current modern day people bear in resemblance. You know, this is a thorny path I'm treading right now, and I don't know enough about it to speak overly intelligent about it. But that is a part of the consideration. But where I wanted to go with that part of the conversation is I've got no problem with them calling themselves what they call themselves, residing where they reside on that piece of land, but not because you reside under the same promises from the former occupants 1900 plus years ago, but because you reside there because of force of arms. And I will say this, of all the nations in that general region, free elections, a sense of democracy, a sense of cooperation with Western alliances, whereas you remember just not so very long ago, all those protests that were taking place on the university campuses and who they were supporting. I would rather have the current occupants residing there than those scholastic hooligans residing there. I hope that I'm using language that is at least somewhat understandable, and not too coated, not too shrouded, so that you can, but hide it just enough so the AI bots at YouTube don't flag me. Well, I'm sitting here in Orangeburg, South Carolina. I am less than 2 miles from my point of delivery tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock local time. And so this afternoon, I'm going to watch some movies. I've never really said before, as I recall, but there's just all kinds of free movies on YouTube, old war movies, old movies in general, dramas, and they're all really quite good. And some years ago, my wife and I cut the cable, and so we subscribed to several of the streaming services like Peacock, Hulu, Netflix, Amazon, and I'm able to get all of those on my iPad. On the road, have unlimited streaming from Verizon, and keep myself perfectly informed and entertained. I will say that it's quite hot outside. I don't know what the actual temperature is, but it's hot and humid. And it made us feel that way only because we're just coming into summer and we're still used to the spring weather, and our skins haven't, and our lungs haven't acclimated quite yet. Okay. So my delivery is at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I expect to be unloaded and on my way by 10:30, and I must go 500 miles to make halfway mark, which will bring me in around Mobile, Alabama or so. I've got to be able to find a place to park at that time of the afternoon. Evening is going to be late, about 7 o'clock, I dare say. I've got a doctor's appointment, and this is the last doctor's appointment on Wednesday for a CT scan. And I should have put a day off in front of that doctor's appointment so I would get in on Monday night. But I've taken a lot of time off here lately, and not that I mind. And I don't think my boss minds so much, but it's the timing of it, the arrangement of it. Because apparently, and I'm coming to discover that my boss does not mind pushing me down to the very last minute before I've got my appointment. And then he'll put me back out on the road. I should have taken another day off after the appointment, because he's going to put me back out on Thursday, and I'm not going to have any time to rest at home. And that bothers me, that he doesn't think about. Because he doesn't have that many drivers to think about. With 15 drivers, and I think I saw on his desk another box of belongings. I think we got a second driver that's quit. So I think we're down to 13. And I can understand why. Here's a little tidbit of information that may be of interest. If you have any interest in anything that I talked about today, and that is about dispensationalism versus replacement theology. The replacement is in the fact that the nation state has no special, today, the nation state to which I have been referring has no special status in the eyes of our God, the God of the Bible, as it once did ages ago. And so it has been replaced because, as somebody as brilliant as Steve Bannon said the other day when he was commenting on the Tucker Carlson, Senator Cruz discussion, Bannon said, I'm a Catholic, and Catholics aren't, now this is what he said, almost a direct quote, and Catholics aren't known for being what you would call Bible-intensive type people. But even I know the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. That the New Testament is called the New Covenant, and there's a reason why it's called the New Covenant, and we're no longer under the Old Covenant. And Jesus himself well, that's the idea. The replacement theology replaces those promises that were made to the people who formerly, in ancient times, more than 2,000, or right up to about 2,000 years ago, who once upon a time occupied that land. The promises that were made to them are no longer valid, and they've been replaced with the New Testament, the New Covenant, the new promises. And so read Galatians and read portions of Romans, the epistle by Paul to the Romans, and what he wrote in Galatians. And okay, that's good enough. I had a whole bunch of text messages come in there, blazing in, 3 or 4. I don't know who they're from. They're going to have to wait. I'm almost done. with my shave. This razor, by the way, is just, I love it. Absolutely love it. I want to get the scales replaced with something newer. But these are all right. They're holding strong, and so that's the important thing. They're not loose as a goose. Okay. One of the reasons I love coming to the Love's truck stops is not only do I get free showers based upon the gallons of diesel that I buy, but I get all my refills, water, ice, soda. If I have I shouldn't be drinking a lot of soda, but every once in a while I get in a fancy for it. And the last couple of days on this trip, I've had a fancy for root beer. And I had an empty bottle in my refrigerator. And so you can bring those into the fountain and fill them up. You can bring your own bottles in, your own containers in, and fill them up. And get a free refill. Using the Ozma alum block, a little bit of sting because it's exceptionally sharp razor, having been honed on the Zulu Gray, and it always does. All my razors that are honed on the Zulu Gray give me an excellent, crisp. I've often said that the Zulu Gray polishes as good as and finishes as good as a Shapton Glass 30,000. Now I'm wiping it off, the alum off, and I could go even so far as to rinse it off because I don't want any of that to get anywhere near the carbon steel of the razor. All right. So that's it. Hour and 13 minutes, 14 minutes. Thank you for staying with me. appreciate it. I'll probably see you next time from home on Wednesday morning before my doctor's appointment, and I will see you down the road.